Well, hi everybody. Meteorologist Joe Chaffee here on this about to be bitter cold night into Thursday morning, but it's still Wednesday at 6:02 Eastern Time on the 30th of January 2019. One day left in the first month of 2019. One day left, and the first month of the year is gone. And I don't know if it's the cold that's impacting my online stuff tonight because my computer is running a bit slow. So I think after I'm done with the show tonight, I'm going to just do a full reboot. Quite an interesting day today, by the way. We had the snow showers and snow squalls that moved on through. And for some parts of my area, this was really the first snows since November. There are folks out there that hadn't seen any snow since November, and this, I guess, broke the ice for just about everybody. For about 5 or 10 minutes in some places, the visibility was down to near zero, a coating to maybe as much as a half an inch. I guess a cheap thrill, albeit a dramatic one, because it really looked and behaved every bit of the way a line of summertime thunderstorms would behave. So we're going to take a look at what's going on right now, the extent of the cold, how low the temperatures will get tomorrow morning, and the warm-up that is actually going to follow all of this as we go through the weekend and into next week, because the pattern is changing. The upper air vortex that brought all this down is dropping in and lifting out and moving right along. So as you drop a ball and hits the ground, and it bounces, and that's basically what the atmosphere is doing. Let me very quickly welcome those of you who are on my weather app, and both on iPhones, iPads, and on Android devices. So we got the iOS version out yesterday, and we been putting up links. And I'll put one up on the chat board in short order. I'll also send it along through the community. If you're a subscriber to my YouTube channel, you'll get a notification of a video, and you'll also get the link. But you can also find it on my website, and I've put up posts on Facebook. It's all over the place. If you can't find a link, just go to Google Play or to the App Store and search Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, and it will come up. Hello to my folks from my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, from Angry Ben's Angry Weather's Facebook page, from Meteorologist Jeff Banson's Facebook page, and also from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Stormwatch page. So there really isn't, in terms of the watches and warnings, we had, for the first time, they invoked the snow squall warnings today in the eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Long Island, New York City, Hudson Valley, southern New England. We actually still have some up. You can see them here on the map. Let me just I'll refresh this real fast, see if we've got the latest ones. And yeah, there's still some now up for central and eastern Massachusetts, going into eastern Massachusetts and up in northern Vermont. Even had those snow squall warnings down into Delaware and into parts of Maryland. So it was odd to see it and kind of odd to hear about it. But again, they just instituted these snow squall warnings for the Weather Service last year did a complete revamp of all their watches and warnings. So that's they popped up today. We still actually have some winter storm warnings up in southwest New York, up in north central New York, some places in there in the snow squall land and snow belt land. We'll get about 2 feet of snow. Winter storm warnings continue in western Michigan, on the shore of Lake Michigan, where the snow squalls have been unending since last night, and also up on the northern coast of the Upper Peninsula. We've got a large area of wind chill advisories, wind chill warnings, high wind advisories, even special marine warning out for eastern Long Island as of 6:06 p.m. Winter storm watches are starting to go up for the mountains of northeastern California. And I think those, yes, we have winter weather advisories that just went up through central Missouri, in and around St. Louis, southward into southern Illinois, and another freeze warning for southeastern Georgia and for northern Florida. Otherwise, really, for much of the nation, The weather is really remarkably quiet. We don't really have any big storms at the moment bringing in any kind of moisture. All this Arctic air, this polar air, whatever you want to call it, is bone dry, so its impact is rather large and covers large area of the United States, even though not everyone is sitting in bitter cold. Laureo is joining me tonight. Yes, he is. Okay, very good. So, hang on one second. I thought we'd start, Joe, with the forecast low temperatures tonight, and we're looking in the, Chicago seems to be front and center in this because of the double-digit lows below minus 23, minus 27 forecast lows here on the prints on the map. So let's average those out to a rather crisp minus 25. And of course, you've got the wind issues that they're dealing with as well with wind chill. But we got below zero readings actually forecast not too far away from the big cities along I-95. Washington for a low of 6, Baltimore 5, Philly 5, New York City 3, Hartford goose egg, and 2 for Boston. But just north and west of there, we're looking at some minus 10, minus 5 to minus 10 readings going on in PA, New York State, and up into western New England.
And for people who are wondering, Joe, why is it that Chicago gets so cold and we stay relatively balmy? I mean, we're talking about New York City staying possibly above zero tonight, and meanwhile Chicago's been well below zero for a very long length of time. It's just that it's not our wind. Our cold weather wind here in the Northeast or in the immediate tri-state area comes from the north. We're going to be looking at mostly a westerly wind tonight and on into tomorrow, and that west wind has a chance to modify some as it passes over the Great Lakes, passes over the Appalachians, and then gets downslope, so to speak. We're on the lee side of the Appalachian chain, so that actually helps to warm the atmosphere up. Not a whole heck of a lot, but it warms it.
But it's the difference between 5 above and 5 below.
Yes.
Or even 5 above and 0.
Absolutely. Kind of a mini Chinook, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Out in the western United States, along the Continental Divide in Montana, when those winds blow downslope of the Rockies, you could sometimes see temperatures rise, 20, 30 degrees over what they may have received further north and west over in portions of western Canada. And for us, it's probably the coldest air mass that we've encountered around here in the last 5 winters. And it's made all the colder by the fact that we have those gusty, stinging, biting, blustery winds tonight into the first part of tomorrow.
Well, and this all really has to do with the fact that if we look at this the upper vortex, whether you call it a polar vortex, Arctic vortex, Siberian, a Siberia vortex, because if you trace it back, it really started out from there, weak, moved across the polar regions, and then strengthened as it moved southward. It's not as if this stuff is just suddenly magically appeared, by the way. There's always a vortex. Sometimes there are several that are up in Canada during the winter time. So, we call them the polar vortex or polar vortices.
No, we don't. The
news media does. But we talked about them in the context of meteorology. They've been there all along. There's nothing new here.
Absolutely.
And every few years, these things pulsate up and down, back and forth. And going to the fact that you're talking about the warmer temperatures, relatively speaking, quote unquote, the core of the cold air dropped down into the plains and western Great Lakes, and that air gets a chance to modify before it gets here, as opposed to if you go back to 2 weeks ago Monday, when we were getting that straight flow from the northeast, from Greenland to eastern Canada down the east coast. There's no downslope there. That is, that took us down to single digits. If the air mass had been a little more extreme, we would have seen large below zero numbers extend pretty far south. As it was, it got pretty cold pretty far south anyway. But this afternoon, Joe, if you look carefully, you can kind of see that the upper, as the upper low rotates around, that upper trough swung through here and helped to trigger off those snow squalls. And now, of course, you're going to see that vortex move up into eastern Canada, and it goes on its merry way. So we're going to have some warmer air coming in as we go through the weekend and into next week.
Well, if you think about the fact that warm air is so much lighter than cold air, cold, dense air, think of that as a kind of a weight, if you will, that vortex passing across the northeastern states. And literally, once it pulls away to the north and east, that weight is taken off of us, and so does the frigidity. We'll see temperatures on Friday rise into the 20s. I know that's not exactly Caribbean weather, but
Right.
we're gonna start. Again, I said this with the last cold wave a week or 10 days ago. We are very adaptable creatures, man and women are, and so we adapt to the very frigid air. And then all you need is just to turn back to the milder airflow, even if it be just a few degrees.
Right.
And
It feels better.
And it feels better. And it may feel better to many on Friday, even though it's only going to rise to the 20s. It'll really feel better on Saturday in the 30s. And my goodness, people heading for Super Bowl parties on Sunday, that's going to be the topic of conversation, I think, at those parties is, boy,
Right.
I'm so happy it's back to normal as opposed to where it was just a few days ago.
The extent of the cold tonight, teens down into northern Mississippi, Alabama, and in through the Carolinas. But you got the 20s down into the Florida Panhandle, and it looks like the freezing line makes it just south of Jacksonville. The 40-degree line to about Orlando, and the 50-degree line near Lake Okeechobee. Basically, I guess, draw a line from about Port Charlotte eastward to, I don't know, maybe Daytona Beach or maybe West Palm Beach. Somewhere in there, that's where the 50-plus degree line is. So this push of cold air is going more east than it's going south. Some of it's going south, but more of it's going east.
And a friend of mine who lives in Boynton Beach, which is not too far from Miami and into South Florida, with the last surge of very cold weather last week, a week or 10 days ago, he was talking about how the local TV stations were talking about what the police and local law enforcement agencies were doing to help shelter the homeless because it was getting so cold, down to around 50 degrees in south central Florida. And, we would be dancing in the street if we had temperatures in the 50s right now.
Well, and I lived in Louisiana.
Again, everything is relative.
When I lived in New Orleans, the minute the temperature got under 70, they were out with their coats on. Mm-hmm. It is according to what you get used to. Meanwhile, up in the northern plains, where it's been brutal, it's going to be another brutal night of minus 30 or lower. Even probably a few minus 40s and minus 45 up there in International Falls. And the West looks just kind of typical. I don't really see anything too unusual there. They're calm right now. The other thing, of course, today was with respect to precip, Joe, was this almost summertime. It really reminded me of a summertime line of showers and thunderstorms, because we had a cold front come through. Right. We had temperatures. Someone asked me earlier today about the fact that how is it that we're getting this? You're going from cold to cold. We're in cold air. Yeah, but you're going from we call it cold because cold is something you feel, but in terms of the abstract number, you're talking about. In terms of the actual temperature,
right.
You're going from temperatures in the mid 30s to temperatures to near zero over a relatively short distance. There's a cold front there.
Right.
And there's vertical motion, and there's, snow squalls, and that's what we got.
We actually saw something we don't often see, both at the Philadelphia Weather Office and the New York Weather Office. They issued snow squall warnings, and I can't even remember the last time that happened, that they had to issue that kind of
I
warning
thought the
advisory.
snow squall warning was something new that the Weather Service, when they revamped all their warnings from last year, and they took out the drizzle watch, and they took out the mist advisory and a few other ones that were just sort of over the top. And I think the snow squall warning was something new that they added. So yeah, we got to see that. And snow squalls not something we see very often here, but it's also the fact that we have. The air was, we had the system from yesterday. The air was dry today to some degree, but there was still probably some moisture in it. I didn't really look at the soundings, but certainly with this push, you had the setup to have snow squalls with that deep upper trough swinging around. It was pretty much it was about a lock as you were going to get as far as the
Oh
snow
yeah.
squall activity was
Last
concerned.
night, for example, some of the short-term models, the HRRR, and especially the 3 kilometer NAM model, and I even displayed it on my Facebook page. A long, narrow, snaky,
Stick. It was like a
snaky
snake,
line.
right?
Yeah.
It was like a
stick.
squall. It was a squall line.
And
Pretty much.
I don't know if anybody heard a rumble or two of thunder. That certainly was a possibility, but we certainly did get the snow. I know up where I live in Putnam Valley, New York, we had about a half an inch, according to my wife. It came, it moved through, and it went.
And it's done.
And it's gone. It's done.
And here's the surface map as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. So the Arctic front is right there, right along the coast, and moved. It's, of course, now we're 2 hours later, but it has moved on to the east, and you've got the big Arctic or polar high in eastern South Dakota, northern Missouri. The gradient is still pretty tight here, going from Wisconsin and Minnesota, so they're still getting wind chill issues, and of course we're going to have wind chill issues tonight, and that cold air will continue to push through into New England. But it's 2 days and done, because we're going to see a warm up, and if we watch the upper pattern, Joe, that vortex just that upper low, or whatever you want to call it, it pulls out, and then you start to see a ridge building in the eastern states. In the transition is Friday. By the way, that ridge is going to be there for the first part of next week. So
Right.
We're going to get a break from the cold. But let's talk about this weak system on Friday, because that really is all it is. It's a let the maps load. Let the heavens be glad and the earth rejoice.
I'm calling it. I build it
There we
tonight.
go.
I build it tonight on some of my Hudson Valley feeds. I'm calling it a snow fake.
Yeah.
It's not really. I mean, maybe it's not a snow fake if you live in southern Pennsylvania or parts of Maryland or
As some
even
of
Delaware.
our viewers tonight do.
Yep.
So yeah, this is just all this is really is warm air. It's warm advection. It's warm air. The Arctic high is pulling out off the coast, and warm air is trying to rush eastward. The vortex is pulling out, and the lower levels are going to be colder for a longer period of time. So while it's still cold enough, and it will be Friday and into early Saturday, you get this area moving east, but there's no real support to it. You've got this upper ridge that's building in the east. We don't have
Right.
really any kind of real shortwave trough there. So, look, it's the kind of thing that produces maybe a coating to as much as an inch in some places Friday afternoon into Friday evening. Some models have it a little further north. Some of them have it a little further south. Some have it all falling apart once it gets east of the mountains. And then after that, Joe, I think the weekend's going to be pretty decent. We'll warm up nicely. Little front there just to our north. It's not really going to get through. It'll just die out. And then eventually, I think we're going to be in the 50s and maybe even get to near 60 on Tuesday in some places as the next storm goes to the lakes and a cold front goes through.
That's amazing, and a lot of people who are winter weather enthusiasts and snow lovers are probably right now banging their heads, saying, "How can we hold on to the cold when the next weather disturbance arrives?" And again, just one of the things is no blocking.
No.
This cold air comes in, and then it goes right on out and opens the door for the milder air.
We this will be the second time, by the way, that we'll have this bitter cold air mass and then just basically warm up and rain and not see a flake or an ice pellet.
Right.
So we've seen that happen over the years. It's not that unusual for where we are in our neck of the woods. But when you're up in Michigan or Wisconsin, you would think that would be something that wouldn't happen. Even here, as that warm air the cold air pulls out, it
Right.
warms up and rains.
Right.
I mean, you don't really, and think about how far below zero they are, minus 20, minus 30,
Right.
and you're not going to see a flake or an ice pellet. But if this works out with a low in northwest Iowa early next week, heading up into western Wisconsin and over Lake Superior, yeah, most of those areas won't see a flake or an ice pellet. It's just amazing when you see it happen in places that are just so much colder on average than what we are. But
Well,
it does happen.
If you step outside tomorrow morning, it's possible that you will be exposed to a wind chill of maybe 20 below zero. And at the same token, when you step outside on next Tuesday afternoon, you may very well have temperatures at or above 50. So we're talking about the way you feel, you'll probably feel Tuesday afternoon about 70 degrees warmer, as opposed, even though the actual air temperatures will still be near zero, it will feel like 20 below tomorrow morning. 50 degrees or thereabouts on Tuesday afternoon, so the difference, the way it feels out there to you, 70 degrees in only 5 days.
All right, so I haven't really looked at the long range, so we can look at it together. Both of us are seeing this for the first time, so there's your vortex pulling out. The Pacific flow takes over here, so it's basically a west-southwest flow across the U.S., deep trough in the west, so the trough wants to go to the west for a little while. The polar connection is cut off into the eastern part of the United States. So now as we move through next week, you start to see eventually the troughing comes back to the east, and you get later next week, it looks like it'll probably try to get colder, but nothing crazy extreme. And I'm just trying to get a feel for this. All right, so I don't know. Then after, of course, now we're so far out in the long range, who knows? But
have you taken a look at the 10 millibar?
Oh, you mean up in the stratosphere?
Yeah.
You want to go up there again?
Yeah.
It looks like at least the Pacific flow sets up for next week, and then gradually you start to get more of a flow back out of Canada, but the mean trough still looks pretty far to the west. But we'll see. I don't see anything here that snow lovers should get overly excited about. Why don't we take a look at the... I thought when I looked at it this yesterday, I haven't put it on the air in a while, but when I looked at this yesterday, it looked like it might be getting ready to split again in the long term. And in fact, we go from the split look, the vortex that's sitting over North America gradually absorbs the one over Siberia, and then it goes back to what it looked like before the split to some degree. And then it appears, Joe, if you watch, you can kind of see that brownish spot. I'm going to just run it backwards. But there's warmer air that comes back from Africa, kind of runs across Siberia, and then starts to move northward again here toward the end of the period. So there it is. You see it right there, that orange spot there? Yeah. So maybe there's another attack of the polar vortex in the stratosphere that's going to get underway about mid-month. I don't know if that's going to mean anything going, in terms of the practical weather and in terms of snow chances going forward if this plays out, but we'll see.
Well, Dr. Drew Cohen had an interesting article. I think it was in U.S. News a day or two ago, and he says that the atmosphere may reload, so to speak, sometime in the mid-February to mid-March time frame for another round of very cold weather. And as we have seen, Joe, these things take their time. We saw this splitting into 2 or 3 polar vortexes. That took place right around New Year's, and we had to wait until like the latter part of this month of January, but you saw what happened on the 20th of January, and you're seeing what's happening right now. So maybe we'll see something like that again mid-month of February, which means that maybe late February or early March. We'll get, but
it does, and I want to say, put this up front, that all of that could happen. It doesn't mean that the troughs and the ridges are going to set up in a favorable spot for your particular location, wherever that may be. We saw the split, and what happened, the trough axis was more closer to 90 west than it was to 80 west. In other words, the upper flow bottomed out too far west, so that storms were moving in a way that the coast changes over to rain, more snow favorability for inland areas, but it was not by any means ideal. Just want to take a look at the weather across the Atlantic and Europe, because there's a strong storm that's going to be coming in from the Atlantic into western France and northern Spain in the next few days. So there probably will be some chances for snow in England and Ireland, a little bit of a northerly flow there going into the North Sea. And then there's another kind of wrapped up low with a rain system for next Sunday night into Monday.
Now, could that possibly be the storm that just passed us by yesterday or last
That could
night.
be. I mean, it comes off from the southwest.
Yeah.
We'd have to look at it on one of the bigger maps. And then you've got a couple of weather systems, more weather systems swinging through. The Atlantic is sending weather systems along. It doesn't look particularly cold here going past the first few days of February, because you're getting rain coming into inland areas in Germany and into Poland. So the colder air seems to be more towards Siberia. So there's I think maybe a bit of a retreat. Let me pull up the Atlantic map. Let's take a look. We can at least trace it back and see how far, where this came from. Let the map load. Maps are courtesy, of course, of tropicaltidbits.com. All right, so that storm looks like it's dropping southeastward from Greenland, and that's the first one. No, Jared, it looks like there's some other low here that forms. We're at Sunday.
It just comes out of
it just sort
nowhere,
of it just forms out there in the central Atlantic and then moves northeastward. And there's another system that drops off of eastern Canada, and that goes up into a 940 low. Nice.
That's
nice.
It makes you want to take a vacation in southern Greenland, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and for the folks in eastern Canada, at least through this period. I don't know that you'll notice the cold any differently than what it usually is.
Right.
And it doesn't appear like you have any storms. I can't show you what's rain. This only shows precip. It doesn't show rain versus snow. So clearly what's up in Canada there is mostly snow. But it doesn't look like any big systems are going to be impacting eastern Canada until Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, where you've got this low supposedly going into the western lakes and near James Bay, and that brings some rain, snow, and some wind up through southeastern Canada and beyond, and then another follow-up after that goes way to the west. And at this point, by the way, Joe, you got some colder air coming back into the east as the flow from Canada gets reestablished for later next week.
I think basically for us, Joe, for you and I as forecasters, we're going to get a little bit of a break the next week or 10 days at least. After we get past this spell of frigidity, back to more seasonable conditions for, in fact, even unseasonably mild conditions for next week. And it doesn't look like any major storm system looming on the horizon in the immediate.
No, it looks pretty quiet. It would kind of make sense in a way. You got this big upper low with such a dominant feature. It just drops down, pulls out completely, and yeah, it just. I guess this is just sort of a way of where the atmosphere just does a big, okay, and takes a break. It has to. In a way, you almost could sense that it runs out of cold air, and you right. said
we just
it
have
may
to wait
reload
now to replenish the supply of frigid air, cold air, and that's going to take a while. And as I go back to what I said about what Dr. Judah Cohen had said, that maybe mid-February to mid-March we'll reload and have one more shot of very cold weather, and conceivably that might happen
right.
maybe later in February or early in March.
Warren Moore says Groundhog Day will be fake this year because spring arrives 6 more weeks. Spring arrives, 6 more weeks of winter not likely. Well, I'm just thankful that Groundhog Day is a Saturday this year, so I don't have to actually be at work and listen to all that nonsense.
I've always wondered, there have been, years where it has been hopelessly cloudy over Puxatawny, Pennsylvania, and yet somehow or other the announcement the groundhog has seen his shadow. I have a feeling, Joe, that
they make it up.
They're making
as
it
they
up,
go along.
Or it's already been made, the night before, whatever.
Well, I remember, in 1314. Okay, now that was a really tough winter in the eastern part of the United States. In 1314, and the cold was unrelenting. So when Groundhog Day came along, I just knew it in the back of my mind. I said, if a PR person's going to write this, the groundhog is not going to see a shadow. He's going to say that spring is just around the corner. So everybody would be,
happy,
thrilled.
Yeah.
Okay, and of course it kept on going up until the middle part of March. I remember I still had snow cover. I had basically snow cover on the ground from the beginning of December right up until the first day of spring.
Right.
Which on Long Island is a very, very unusual thing to happen. But all I could think of was looking at the pattern and everything that was going on, and I said, somebody's going to want to put this rodent in a 350-degree oven.
Yeah.
With a little bit of olive oil, some rosemary and sage, and you're all set. Okay?
There were a lot of on social media, I remember pictures of the groundhog and then 2 words underneath it, I lied.
Yes.
And
exactly.
And a lot of people wanted that. In fact, somebody actually brought up maybe it was a lawyer or something like that, bringing up a case against the groundhog, something stupid like that. But the people who hold this every year in Puxatawny, Pennsylvania, they're probably just thrilled. Hey, as long as you know how to spell my name.
Well, exactly. The only thing worse being talked about is not being talked about.
Right.
Here's a question from Izzy, who is probably just relieved now that he was able to download my weather app on his iPhone. I want to ask you both, he says, on the idea about throwing in the towel for the winter. And you're referring to the fact that we're in that New York City, that the areas basically from Boston down to Philadelphia and points east have been sitting in a dry snow hole this winter. I've been holding one for a long time, ready to refer to snow and not cold. All right, so I'm kind of using this. I guess the logical way of answering the question is, it becomes evident now that the last 2 months for snow lovers has been for the coastal areas
right.
in the snow hole. I want to be clear, because if you're in upstate New York, if you're in central or northern New England, and not too far upstate New York, and in eastern Pennsylvania, and you've had actually a fair amount of snow, and some places are running above average. So it's this. And if you're down in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and in Virginia and in those areas, you're also above average. You won't see another flake or an ice pellet for the rest of the winter. You're going to finish above average. But for those in that stretch along I-95, the last 2 months have been a complete waste of time. So the bottom line is that you've got the month of February, and if you get a good pattern like you had last year, maybe you could stretch it through a good chunk of the month of March. But just to be fair, let's just say the first half of the month of March and February. So you basically got about 6 or 6.5 weeks left. You're going to lose 1 week now because of the pattern that we're breaking down at the moment, and it's probably going to take another week for it to repair itself.
Right.
So you're basically running down to about 4 weeks where something could happen. And I'm just wondering, Joe, where at this stage it may just boil down to 1 or 2 chances. I'm not, this is not a forecast. I'm just I'm making an obvious observation based on the calendar that maybe there won't be time for more than a couple of chances between now and the end of the winter.
Well, yeah,
for snow lovers.
One of the things that we brought up at the very beginning of the season was that we only have had 7 of these in the 150-plus year record of at Central Park. 7 years where the liquid precipitation, has gone above 60 inches, and in all 7 cases, we've had below normal snowfall years or winters that immediately followed that. Last year, we saw over 60 inches at Central Park. Maybe there's something to that, but so far it's falling.
And a good chunk of that came in March.
Right.
Where I am in Central Long Island, I had 75 inches for the season last year, and almost 40 of those inches came in the month of March.
Right.
So,
right. So maybe there's something to this.
We'll see.
It doesn't seem like it's a good pattern now, and maybe it may not be a good pattern over the final 6 weeks coming up, but. I said this before, you folks who are snow enthusiasts or snow weenies, as they sometimes refer to in the parlance of meteorology, you have nothing really to complain about. You've had 6 incredible winters in a row of above normal snowfall. Last year, March alone, you had 4, count them, 4 nor'easters.
Right.
And now that some of you are ready to throw yourself off the top of a building only because it hasn't gone.
A subpar year for the coast was long overdue after a long stretch where it was exactly the opposite. Speaking of, actually not even speaking of, I was trying to make a segue and it failed miserably. All right, we got to go because Joe and I both have stuff to do tonight. So try and stay warm. We will have our Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight on Facebook at 9:25 Eastern Time. My neck has been a problem. I've been talking about it, and the chiropractor got hold of it today, and he seemed to has done something positive. So let's see how long it holds.
Okay.
And just trying to think of what else is going on. No, that's it. So the Joe and Joe Show tonight at 9:25 Eastern. We should be back tomorrow to our normal live stream time, which is 7 o'clock. Usually it's at 7, but because of stuff that we have to do, and we got to eat some dinner as well, which is more important.
That would be nice.
Right. So we'll be back to the 7 o'clock live stream tomorrow. Those of you who haven't yet downloaded my weather app, guess what? You can download my weather app. And let me bring up the links for you. First of all, if you have an Android device, you can download it on Google Play. And you can either go there and search meteorologist Joe Chaffee, or there's the link for you. And here we go. So that's Google Play. And we will have, oh God, oh, the world I live in.
It's technology, Joe.
Yeah, I'll show you.
Technology.
Yeah, I know it's technology.
Would you have thought that you'd be doing this like 20 years ago, even 10 years ago? That this explosion.
You know what, Joe? I truthfully, I wish I were 20 years younger, because I'm really I enjoy this very much. Mm-hmm. To be able to interact with the audience, and more importantly, I enjoy the fact that it's my show and I can do what I want, and I don't have anyone telling me you can't show the 500 millibar map on the air. You can't show. You can't do a 50-minute live stream on weather. Right. You know what? I can. It's my channel. Right. And here, by the way, here's the iTunes link for those of you who have to go to the App Store. Muther Gooder, I hope you're staying warm where you are. You're not. At least the extreme cold's not getting down. Well, I guess maybe you're in Western North Carolina, so everything is relative.
Izzy says you look 20 years younger. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, well, my neck is making me feel 40 years older, which puts me over 100. And Robert Hurley, thanks very much for the compliment on the app. Getting a lot of good feedback on it, and I'm really happy about that, Joe. So let's say goodnight.
And we'll be back on Facebook later.
Right, 9:25. See you guys later.
Stay warm.